And our first speaker is Chris McMean, who's the Deputy Superintendent of Tacoma-Water. Chris is responsible for the planning and execution of water treatment, watershed management, environmental stewardship programs, and drinking water regulatory compliance for Tacoma Public Utilities. He has worked in the water industry for 25 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, an engineering consultant, a drinking water regulator, a utility engineer, and a manager. So clearly someone who's not stuck in a silo. This guy has reached across many disciplines, and we're really pleased to have him join us here today. Please join me in welcoming Chris McMean.
Thank you, Bruce. It's funny because as I was listening to Steve's talk, I was thinking, I am going to be talking about a silo. He gave a great talk, I thought, on systems thinking around water. And for me, it's just a privilege to be in a room full of people who are here to talk about water. It's where I've spent my entire career. I'm very passionate about it. I love water. And generally, in a group of people, of friends, not so many people are that way. So it's nice to be with a group of people focused on water. Well, I'm going to give you a little background on Tacoma Water. Tacoma Water is a municipally owned public water utility that serves 300,000 people directly every day to the meter. But in addition to that, we have partnerships with utilities in the region, King County and Pierce County, where we can serve up to 200,000 more people through those connections. And then we just recently, some of our staff did an analysis of every connection we have with every utility in the region, and on any given day, conceivably, we can serve up to almost 1 million people water. We don't do that, but it is interesting just how connected we are to the whole Pierce County, King County region. The majority of our water comes from the Green River watershed, and this is a nice picture of the watershed, Howard Hanson Dam on the bottom. It's a 235 square mile uninhabited watershed that Tacoma first began to utilize almost 100 years ago. In fact, next May we'll celebrate our 100th anniversary. And I just can't speak highly enough of the visionaries who in the late 1800s, early 1900s, procured that land and made this happen. It was truly long-range thinking. And we have benefited from it here since. In addition to that, we have a robust groundwater supply, an urban groundwater supply. So when I hear about recharge of surface water over that urban condition, I'm thinking that's great for stormwater. What is the impact to groundwater? So there's always a little complication in systems thinking. We have a budget of about $75 million a year and 248 employees. So I want to spend a few slides on our economic realities right now as they have developed over the last several years. And we measure our economic viability in two ways. Our customers, how many customers we have, and how much product they buy. So you can see from this slide over the last 4 years, we've been affected like so many in the region in their business enterprises. Our customers are down, significantly down. Now, we're seeing a little uptick in 2012, and we all hope that trend's continuing, but it has been very real to us as we look at the meters and sales. This is probably the more important slide, and this is the one that was reverberating in my mind as Steve was going over what is a great big picture concept, and that's sustainability in the long run. This is a slide that shows our water demand over the last 60 years, and the bold red line are actual sales of water in the region, and you can see the way that curve trends. We sell as much water today as we did in 1960, despite, I think it's been roughly about a 35% increase in population in that time. So we're moving a whole lot less product through the infrastructure that our ratepayers have invested in. The series of colored lines there are the various demand projections that were done over time. So in 1990, 1980, we're planning on lines that are going to continue to ramp up. Well, that was done by the people who were the experts in the field. And we certainly thought that investments in infrastructure and in being ready to serve those customers would be necessary and serve that demand, and it just hasn't happened. So the last two lines you see, the ones that are relatively flat, are our latest demand forecasts. And you can see that despite the anticipation of population growth, this is a popular region, people will continue to come here. We are not projecting significant additional sales of water. And when your product is your cash flow, you can understand that that's a significant financial reality for us. And this is not unique to Tacoma. Seattle has a series of curves that look just like this, as do others. So, in sum, these are our economic realities. We have, as has been discussed earlier in all the utilities, we have a lot of capital investment in the ground. We must spend many, many dollars to get $1 of revenue. Those assets are fixed. So whether we move a gallon of water down the pipe or 10 gallons of water down the pipe, it frankly doesn't make a lot of difference in the costs to the utility. We operate in an environment where I think people have extraordinarily high expectations of reliability. I just ask yourself that question. You go home tonight and your water's off. Is that going to be what you expect? And if it's off for a day or a week or a month, is that going to be okay? I don't think it is. And we operate in that environment. And we are heavily regulated. We're a government. Governments regulate, but we are at the same time very, very regulated, both in terms of quality and reliability, and that drives much of our economic reality. I think the good news for us today, and as we go forward, is that even with those challenges, and with good cost control, with good business practices, which is something that I think I'm very fortunate to work in an environment at Tacoma Public Utilities where it's a business environment, and the expectation is that you operate in that manner, and we're able to keep price of water regionally competitive. So a couple slides here just to demonstrate that. The blue bar is Tacoma's cost of water for an average residential customer. You can see we're sort of in the lower middle tier relative to our peers. There are certainly others who are less expensive. Commercially, the same thing. And this is very important to us because the businesses of this community and the people who live here are the lifeblood. And if we become an obstacle to business growth or development because water is exorbitantly expensive or is unavailable, then we failed. And there have been communities in this region that did face moratorium. People couldn't get new water connections. Businesses left. It's a very, very bad place to be, and I think that the planning that the utility has done over many, many years has shown benefit. I want to divert for a minute right now on the single largest capital investment project that the utility has ever done, and we're in the midst of it right now. And it's that picture I showed you of the Green River earlier. Today, water coming down out of that watershed into our piping system. Well, if you had tap water on your tables, it would be to your glasses, but that water's not filtered. It comes right out of the river. It's treated, disinfected, it's safe, but it's not filtered. And under some regulatory constructs that have been developed, we had to provide some additional treatment and went through a rigorous process, a long process of public outreach and information to make a decision about whether to move forward with filtration for the next 100 years. And actually several people in the room here in the Economic Development Board were very helpful in getting that outreach to the business community. But ultimately, the board, Tacoma Public Utility Board, and the City Council elected to go forward with filtering the Green River supply. And the water quality benefits are numerous. The reliability benefits, in terms of systems thinking again, are numerous, and we are moving forward with that project. I think it was one of the best opportunities we as a utility have had to go out to the community and listen to what they had to say. And what people said, again and again, frankly, was we want safe water, and we want it every day. And this solution for filtering the Green River supply will achieve that goal, and will achieve it for a long, long time. Total capital cost of this project is about $196 million. At the time we were out there sort of selling it, it was more than that. If it's one silver lining in this down economy, it's that it's been much more economical to build big projects. So today, this is well, I would say a year ago, this is what the site looked like, where we take water out of the river and treat it. It's a relatively simple set of facilities. Right now, it's a massive construction site, but in 2 years, it will look like this. And just for scale, that white circle at the top, the bigger one, is about the size of a football field. So it's a very large set of facilities that are being constructed that will make this water, I would say, the very best, certainly in the United States. So it's going to be extraordinary. Earlier in the day, there was discussion about value propositions, the value proposition of water. And over the last year or so, the management team at Tacoma-Water has been involved in the development of a strategic plan, a set of strategic initiatives to meet this mission statement, if you will, on the left, providing clean, reliable water now and in the future. And just as we heard a lot about resiliency here over lunch, that has been an overarching objective of Tacoma Waters as we look forward to the next 100 years to being the place where businesses can come and reliably access safe and abundant water. And we framed our plans, if you will, in that framework of risk and resiliency. Retail customers are our bread and butter. They're the businesses and the people who live here. And one of the major initiatives that we will be continuing to move forward in the next several years is to reach out to those customers and just make sure we understand what they want. We in the utilities are not good at marketing. We're just not. We're engineers, we're planners. We don't know anything about marketing. So the utilities as a whole, and I will include the power and the water utility, are initiating an effort to really look at marketing, not to sell people things they don't need or want, because they need and want power, but to understand in what way do they want them, in what information will allow them to make better decisions, whether it be conservation decisions, use decisions, business planning decisions. So that will be a major initiative for us in the coming years. We have a number of wholesale systems we sell water to, and this is where market forces come to bear for a otherwise monopolistic venture, as we know we are. We have connections to systems that choose not to use the water Tacoma can provide, and the reason they do it is generally on pricing, generally on convenience. So we have a true marketing need to go out into the wholesale market and perhaps extend that out to some of our larger commercial customers to say, how can we better meet your needs for water supply if you're making decisions to develop new supplies? And this is really where it gets into the larger systems thinking that I think we heard about over lunch. If we are connected to a water utility and they're drilling new wells out in Pierce County because our water is either inconvenient or too expensive, that is a net negative for the region. It's a net negative for the community because we've invested, our ratepayers, many of you have invested in infrastructure that is standing ready to serve while they develop new sources. That's a true competitive problem, and we're going to be addressing that. Water, infrastructure, asset management, you've heard about that already today. We have a very sharp focus on asset management. We have 100-year-old infrastructure in some cases. We need to make smart, data-driven decisions on how to renew that, and I think many of the same concepts of assessing the quality of the infrastructure, using technology, using data that you heard about already today are coming to play for us. And we just look forward to putting those into practice and continuing. So back to the value proposition. We're not marketers, as I said, but we can draw stark contrasts. So every day, people get in their cars and they drive to get a gallon of gas, buy a gallon of milk, maybe buy bottled water at 4 orders of magnitude more cost than a gallon of water delivered from your tap to your house. I think that we deliver a value proposition that cannot be overstated. And we're going to do a much better job, I hope, in the next several years to increase awareness in the community, in the region that we serve, about the value proposition of Tacoma Water and of tap water in general, because truly, it is priceless. And with that, I conclude.
John Conkle. John is with Simpson. He's also a board member at the Economic Development Board, so we really appreciate that. He has been working for Simpson for quite some time, for over 29 years in the paper industry itself. He currently is the general manager at the Simpson Tacoma Craft Mill. As most of us know, they are a premier manufacturer of packaging-grade pulp and paper products that are sold worldwide for industrial and food-based packaging. And in the economic development world, remember earlier I talked about primary businesses that are making a product or service here and selling it outside this market, thereby bringing new dollars into this market. That's how you grow an economy. Simpson's the perfect example of that kind of company. So with that, please join me in welcoming John Conkle.
Thanks, Bruce, for that introduction. As it was mentioned in my bio in the blue sheets there that I'm a transplant from Pennsylvania. And it's kind of ironic, I guess, that I'm standing here today talking a little bit about water, because one of the reasons when I moved out here 30 plus years ago at Fort Lewis that I decided I wanted to stay in the Tacoma area is that in the wintertime you certainly don't have to shovel the rain. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today a little bit about Simpson and jobs. It's very interesting that I'm following Chris because I think what I want to talk about today is that we are probably part of his problem when you look at some of the graphs that he put up there for some of the things that we've done at Simpson. But I think that other things that I want to talk about today are potentially part of the solution as to how we can generate more jobs in this area and use water correctly. So one of the purposes, as stated in the brochure about Wellspring 2012, is how do we go about creating jobs and using our resources properly. So I want to touch on two topics today. Circling around job creation and what we have done at Simpson in the past and what we as a community now, as the community of Tacoma, can do in the future to create jobs. First, I want to talk about how Simpson has used technology and innovation to leverage our natural resources in this area to sustain our local manufacturing jobs and the importance of those jobs in our economy. Bruce mentioned the ability to bring money into the community through manufacturing jobs. And secondly, I'd like to talk about how Tacoma can leverage its water resources and other resources in the area in the future to create new manufacturing jobs using new technologies that are out there right now. So first, a little bit about background on Simpson. This is an aerial view of the Tacoma Craft Mill. Simpson also has other facilities in the Tacoma Tide Flats area. Simpson is a privately owned Washington-based company. Its headquarters for Simpson are here, located in Tacoma on the Tide Flats. They've been in business in the Puget Sound region for 122 years. It's a privately held company. They are committed to the local economy. Simpson has 7 manufacturing sites located throughout western Washington. And they've owned this Tacoma Craft Mill since 1985 when they bought it from the St. Regis Corporation. The majority of our owners, because we're privately held, live locally in the Seattle and Tacoma area. And they understand the balance between running a successful business and the need to protect the environment. And this balance and commitment to the environment and business is not really new. Our founder, Saul Simpson, back in the 1890s, started as a timber company. But in the 1940s, Simpson was one of the first companies in the entire Pacific Northwest to start planting sustainably harvested trees on its tree farms down in the Shelton area. And we're currently on our third rotation of sustainably harvested trees that Simpson has planted. So it's a political season, and we've certainly gone through a pretty tough recession here recently. And so there's a lot of discussion about jobs, and especially manufacturing jobs. And why are manufacturing jobs so important? Well, I think we all know the answer to that there's a tremendous multiplier effect for manufacturing jobs in our economy. For every dollar created by a manufactured product sale, and that's what we do at Tacoma Craft, we manufacture products, 1.5 additional revenue dollars are created elsewhere in the economy. For us, that means that we're creating about $450 million of economic activity. National statistics indicate that for every manufacturing job that's out there, they pay about 20% higher average wages than your typical average job. And for every manufacturing job out there, national statistics also indicate that 2 additional jobs are created in the local economy. As it shows behind us here, we have 400 employees at the Tacoma Craft Mill with an average annual pay and benefits of over $100,000 a year. That translates, if you use the multiplier effect, to about an additional 800 jobs in the local area that as a result of our manufacturing jobs at Tacoma Craft. Our local governments, public utilities, Chris back there, and the ratepayers for those public utilities benefit from our steady revenue and the taxes paid by the mill. We pay about $20 million to Tacoma Public Utilities for the cost of their service. Chris mentioned the tremendous infrastructure that's out there from Tacoma Public Utilities, both water and electricity. So we pay cost of service as well as by the energy or by the water that we're purchasing. And we pay another $5 million in local taxes. And local businesses in the Tacoma area sell us everything from raw materials and spare parts to office supplies and professional services. I see a lot of consultants out here. They probably want to sell me a lot of professional services in the future after this talk. Not all manufacturing businesses will necessarily be on the scale of what I'm showing here behind you. Some are certainly a lot larger. If you think about Boeing and their influence in this area, and you can think of small manufacturing companies, but manufacturing jobs have a positive economic impact on a local economy. So in addition to the economic benefit on the local economy, Tacoma Craft has had, I think, a very good history of improving its business in the last 27 years that Simpson has owned the mill and the environment through a lot of innovation by the people that work at Tacoma Craft, as well as through technology changes that have taken place. In the past 27 years that the mill has been owned by Simpson, they've invested $500 million in new capital investments at the mill. Now, when you think about $500 million of capital investments in a very industrial site, there's an additional multiplier effect that's out there, and that's construction jobs. The majority of that $500 million was spent on local contractors and local union tradesmen from the Tacoma area and the Tacoma union halls. So I'd like to tell you briefly about a few of these investments that improve the environment as well as our business. I think it was mentioned somewhere here earlier this morning. I think when we were talking about the Theophos waterway cleanup and some of the other water cleanups. Well, when Simpson bought the mill in 1985, they developed a very innovative and collaborative solution working with local environmental groups, local governments, the United States EPA, and the Indian tribes to become the first successfully cleaned up U.S. marine Superfund site in the nation. And recently, on the Thea Foss waterway, Simpson partnered with the city of Tacoma to help clean up that site, and through a very innovative solution also. This forum is talking a little bit about fresh water, and Chris mentioned he had a nice chart up there about water usage heading off into the stratosphere, and then in about 1990, it kind of started channeling downward. And I think that Simpson, at that point in time, was one of the reasons for that happening. We were going through a pretty severe drought in the early 1990s, and Simpson decided that water conservation was good for our business as well as good for the local economy, because we're Tacoma Utilities' largest water user. Over the last 20 years, Simpson has reduced its water usage by 50%. Now, we always thought that that was a good thing because it was going to allow Tacoma Public Utilities to sell that water to the city of Bellevue and various other places that were all expanding, as well as a lot of expansion in Pierce County and the Tacoma region. As Chris mentioned, that's not necessarily a great thing at this point in time, but from a water conservation standpoint, when you think about the bigger picture, water conservation is still a good thing to do. And so we have reduced our water usage by 50% since the early 1990s. We've made investments in new washing and bleaching technology that it takes to make our products. And that includes many technology beta sites. I think that's one of the unique things about Simpson is that we've stretched ourselves from technology standpoint and decided that, you know, you can go out a little bit on the limb, and when you do go out on the limb a little bit, there's some pretty big rewards. And some of the changes that we've made in our paper making process, it helped us gain further market share, as well as reducing our cost beyond our competition for some of the technology beta sites that we've put in. In addition to improving our products, we've also had a significant impact on our water emissions. We reduced the amount of chemicals, and we increased tremendously the amount of recycled paper that we use to make our products, so that we're not bringing it all in as raw material, raw wood chips to manufacture all our products. We updated our boilers. This had a significant reduction in the infamous aroma of Tacoma. I can stand here and say that because I was part of the problem with the aroma of Tacoma. But I think that some of the technology that we put in our plant over the last 20 years has had a significant reduction in that. And also by working on our boilers in the early 1990s, it's enabled the Tacoma Tide Flats area to be in compliance for particulate emissions, and I think you're going to hear a lot more about that over the next coming months as we go through this discussion about PM 2.5 and fireplaces in South Tacoma. And most recently, our latest and largest project that was ever done at Tacoma Craft is began producing renewable green electricity, which reduces fossil fuel use and also reduces greenhouse gases in the production of power to generate electricity for about 40,000 homes. So, what's any of that have to do with why are we here at this conference today? Well, I've mentioned the word technology a lot here, I think, as we start. And so I want to use our past success with technology to create a vision for Tacoma and how we can use technology in the future here in Tacoma. So water and sustainably harvested trees are both renewable resources, and both are in abundant supply in the Puget Sound region. So Simpson believes that there is definitely a role for companies to move to this area that are employing new technology for sustainable manufacturing. We believe that's important for America. You hear a lot of that on the stump speeches going on around the country as well, but I believe it's very important because I think we have the resources here in Tacoma to make it very important for the Puget Sound region. The Tacoma Tide Flats area has a lot of infrastructure down there. I believe that area can become a hub for new technology, sustainable resource companies that provide family wage manufacturing jobs if we properly leverage our human ingenuity, our engineering, and the natural resources in this area. Doesn't look like trees, does it? I'm going to talk about trees for a second. Trees are a renewable and sustainable carbon-based resource. Now, there's always a lot of discussion about carbon out there, but trees, basic building block of a tree is carbon. New technology is unlocking new opportunities to replace fossil-based carbon resources, which are not renewable, with biomass-based carbon resources, which are renewable. Among these are, and I just have a few examples up here, biomass-based automotive and aviation fuels, such as cellulosic ethanol, aviation jet fuel, biodiesel, and syngases. Carbon fiber technology. You hear a lot about carbon fiber technology for lightweight materials. Basic building blocks of carbon fiber technology come from petroleum. It's the exact same building block that builds a tree. The carbon molecules are all there. They're all the same. And renewable biomass green electricity. So here's a vision for you. Someday soon, we're going to all be driving cars, maybe flying in that Boeing airplane up there, made from tree-based, not petroleum-based carbon fibers, powered by biomass renewable energy. Kind of looks like winter in Tacoma.
No snow, though.
No snow. That's right. So these technologies that I'm talking about at a manufacturing scale need a couple things. They need renewable resources and they need water resources. The rain and snow in the area are renewable. And Tacoma has a reliable water infrastructure that we need to put to use that's already in place for manufacturing. Tacoma, if you think back to our history from the 1880s or so, has always had a natural resource-based economy since its founding. And I believe that our future economy in the Tacoma area has a place for natural resource-based manufacturing also, and that the new technologies that are being developed out there for sustainable natural resources can be the base for that new manufacturing that takes place on the tide flats. Now, I heard a lot of discussion here about not being in silos, and I think that that's a good thing about this this forum that we're here today, because to bring forth these new technologies, you can't operate in a silo. You truly have to operate in a very collaborative way. It's going to take some additional academic research. It's going to take a lot of educational opportunities. These are science, math, engineering-based type technologies, and we need to continue to encourage our students, certainly here at the UWT as well as in our high schools, to take those classes and move us forward on a science and engineering standpoint. It's also going to take cooperation from government, the citizens, and local businesses to work together to try to attract these companies, these types of manufacturing companies, because I think they have a significant impact on our local economy. So I don't think one thing that Bruce talked about earlier here is that we have a lot of good cooperation here between the University of Washington and WSU. So I'm a chemical engineer by education. I'm a proud Husky. And I think that there's been some great research going on at our great research universities in this state. Both WSU and the University of Washington are doing this type of basic research right now on these types of technologies. So what's our goal coming out of this? I think it's time for us as a community to move out of the labs, move out of these research labs that are taking place up at the universities, and form a coalition here that can attract these types of manufacturing companies to Tacoma, because I think they'll have a significant impact on our local economy. So thank you very much.
Well, our third panelist is Kim Irvin, is the West Region Drinking Water Practice Leader for CH2M Hill. She specializes in water treatment planning and design and provides analysis of water quality and treatability of waters, facility planning, and management of existing water resources. She's an accomplished project manager, has worked in the Tacoma market. She's worked in the Cedar River watershed. She's worked in the up and down the Puget Sound corridor, and we're quite pleased to have her join us and be part of the conversation here today. So with that, please join me in welcoming Kim Irvin.
Well, thank you. I am pleased to be here today, both as a drinking water professional and also as a UW grad, so it's fun to be back here for that. I'm the last speaker this morning of the agenda, and as drinking water, we're not used to being last. We usually think of ourselves as first because we're up at the top. But I think all of that is part of what we're talking about here today. Is there's not really a beginning and an end. It's a circle, and understanding how we all fit into that cycle and generate ideas there is really what we're talking about today. So, since Paul was kind enough to do my advertising for me earlier, I won't have to say too much about CH2M Hill, but there we go. We are a Northwest company. We were rooted here, started here, and so we have a lot invested in this area. And now we are a global company, so that brings the global perspective, but also still our regional focus. This is where we started. This is our home. We have a diverse business portfolio, which is how we tie into this. You might know us in one area or another, but we really do a lot of water, transportation, industrial, O&M, government, all that kind of power, all that kind of work. So it helps us to bring tying those different pieces together and get that thought energy going there. I want to begin today with a thought about the water market and where water is used. So what are the different ways that we use it? You'll see the largest user, by and away, is agriculture, which is sort of some ways outside of what we're talking about here today, except that we did talk earlier about that non-point source pollution and how that ties into our water supply and chain. The next biggest user is municipal use and industry, followed by energy. But that's not where the money is spent. By and large, the money is spent by the municipal markets. The next one in line there is industry and energy, and that's a place where we're seeing a lot of growth in water use there. As globally, there's more industry expanding into different areas. So drilling down a little bit, how is water used in Tacoma? The largest, based on the Tacoma Public Utilities Water Plan, the largest user, about half, is residential uses, followed by commercial and industrial paper use. So Simpson is still using a good share of the water, and wholesale uses as well, selling it to other customers around the region. But drinking water is not just for drinking. In 2009, the average single-family household in Tacoma used 79 gallons of water per person each day. Did you drink that much? I don't know about you, but I drink less than a gallon a day, which means that roughly 1% of the water that I'm using, and this is just in my municipal use, not even extending to all the products that I'm consuming, is actually consumed. The rest goes for all the other uses around my household. And that's just in that green residential side. all the other water that comes down the pipe and delivered to commercial and industrial users goes to making products and other things that are consumed in our daily life. So we talked about the high quality of water supply that we have treated to drinking water standards when really we're drinking very little of it. So we produce, consume, and dispose, and then do it again. We have this manufacturing process, and historically it's been taking raw materials, minerals, and resources, using them up, and a small stream maybe gets recycled or reused, but a lot went to waste generation, back into the system or out the system, and we're taking new resources. So eventually we will run out of those non-renewable resources and looking at how can we better utilize our resources, in this case, our water in this cycle. There's been talk earlier today about managing the whole water portfolio, a holistic approach for developing water management strategies and infrastructure and providing more resilient, long-term, sustainable water life cycle, which has really been the focus of what we're talking about here today, this resiliency, protecting ourselves against drought, protecting our water, protecting our fish, and still being able to grow and develop economically. Oh, hold on, if you're sensitive to motion, you might want to avert your eyes. This one goes on its own. There you go, okay. Couldn't figure out how to turn that off. Market drivers, so we have several drivers that are going into the water market. Population, water scarcity, energy, carbon uses, the environment, regulations, climate, sustainability. All these things are driving into our water cycle and impacting the decisions we make. In Tacoma, in this area, as Chris talked about, the water comes from up in the mountains, snow melt, clean, we clean it up some more, and we send it down the pipes. There's an abundance of water. Does that mean that there's no opportunity for reuse type of projects? No, it just means we need to understand the drivers. The drivers aren't always water scarcity. That may be the issues down in Southern California or in the desert. But there's other drivers. During the wastewater section, we talked about nitrogen limits and disposal to the Puget Sound. Those are the drivers that impact this area. And so how can we leverage those to start getting some innovative ideas out there and moving us into the next century of water supply? I wanted to highlight one project being worked on here in Tacoma on the water side. It's a regional water supply in the Puget Sound, managing risk and planning for the future. So in addition to building a new water filtration plant to provide more reliability and a cleaner water source, Tacoma also has the vision to look at understanding their water supply and their reliability, how much water can they commit to providing every year, and understanding that so that can leverage that into economic development. How much water can they sell? How many contracts can you sign? That kind of thing. So it's about this project, and was about developing a model to look at historical water use, historical water supply, and future changes like climate change, and balancing all the demands on the water system, flood control, conservation, fish and in-stream flows, and municipal and industrial uses as well. So the model was developed, a dynamic model, so they can run all of the different scenarios, can look at operating parameters on a year-to-year basis, and as more information becomes available or things change, they can be plugged into the model and looked at over time. So it's not a static one-time thing. A lot of the older evaluations that have been done were limited and not dynamic. This allows more dynamic input. Modeling provides a better understanding of the yield and reliability of the water supply, using both the Green River water and well water, understanding how much is available in the summer and in the spring. So the project increased the risk-adjusted calculated average summertime yield by 20%. So did it create water? No, it created a better understanding of the water so that they can move forward with confidence, understanding how much water they have available. It does look at climate change scenarios and understanding how that might impact in the future, and as new ones are developed, the model can be reevaluated. So businesses are looking for areas with lower water risk to grow, affordable pricing, and Tacoma-Pierce County has great potential. As others have talked about, there's a plentiful and reliable water supply, a regional conveyance system in place, and future filtration for improved water quality, so more sensitive industries can be attracted to the area by the higher water quality. That's all I wanted to cover today, and special thanks to the Tacoma Water folks too for supporting us, working with us on that project.
Alluded to a neighboring area, and I'm not asking you to name that area, but a neighboring area that's digging wells when there's plenty of capacity, obviously, at Tacoma Water. Talk about the obstacles that have led to that happening. What's the paradigm, whether it's a policy paradigm, is it an infrastructure paradigm? What's led to that happening, which it sounded like you were suggesting means we're not as advanced in our collaborations as we should be. So what's going on there?
Well, I think there are a number of things at play as neighboring utilities develop their own resources. Sometimes it's political, frankly. It's a desire to control one's own water resources, one's own pricing, things of that nature. Sometimes it's a failure to fully evaluate the cost of development and ownership on the utility's part that's developing new resources. So it might be a certain number of dollars to go and drill a well and equip it, and they can do that cost analysis, but are they looking at the full cost of treatment, of monitoring, of staffing, et cetera? So I think that sometimes full cost pricing isn't done. As we look at the wholesale market and our pricing of wholesale water, I think we have to reflect also inwardly on how that pricing has been developed. You know, we are a cost to service utility, and we work very hard to equitably share those costs across the various rate classes. And we need to, that's one of our takeaways, is to look at the way we price water across all the rate classes. So there's work to do on both sides, and what we're trying to do is reach out to those communities and to say, we want to partner with you so that we all have a full and sort of level understanding of the issues.
Kim, let me ask you, in your experience, a similar, along that vein, have you seen, because you've worked with a lot of different municipalities, folks making decisions that from a technical perspective or from your perspective may not be the best use of resources, but they're doing it because of policy obstacles or turf issues or things like that, without naming communities necessarily, but is this an isolated problem that Chris has just described, or are you seeing that in other places around the Northwest, around the country?
I think we've definitely done work for communities that have made the choice to develop their own water supplies because they did the initial cost of investment instead of the life cycle cost of investment, as Chris was alluding to. So Tacoma has more infrastructure than just the treatment plants and the pipelines. You also have people and structures that go into that price, but the other utilities don't necessarily capture that when they're doing their evaluation. And in some cases, they have been able to develop least costly options because they're groundwater that didn't require any treatment or something like that. So there are cases where it might have been.
Are there cases where you've seen communities figure out how to work with each other in a way where maybe there isn't additional capacity added where it's not necessary, where you've got the larger other utility that's able to provide? Are there examples like that out there?
There's definitely, a good Puget Sound partnership, I would say, between the water utilities, and Chris could speak to it more, but between Seattle and Cascade Water Alliance and Tacoma, I think there's a good understanding of the big water producers and sharing and interconnecting systems to make them more reliable and robust, and also offset, not everyone developing ultimate extra capacity.
So speak to that. This gets to this resiliency question that Steve Modemeyer and others have spoken about. So maybe, I don't know who, Chris, one of you can talk about how these different systems across Puget Sound connect or not connect. Meaning, if we had some event here, and Steve Modemeyer suggested, and we know our geologic history here suggests that at one time or another, some part of the bigger complex of water delivery in Puget Sound may go down for a while, whether it's ours or somebody else. Is there connectivity to move product from one area that has it now but may not have it for a while, from an area that may have it that we need it from should something happen, earthquake-wise, that sort of thing?
At this stage, we're sub-regionally connected. We're connected to many utilities in the Pierce County and South King County area, but we're not connected to Seattle. There are plans that have been developed to connect our system to Seattle's. I think we're in the $90 million range to do that. And that was part of the Cascade Water Alliance intent back when those curves, before they'd all flattened out, and Cascade thought they were going to need significant amounts of water from Tacoma in lieu of developing lake taps, which ultimately, may come to pass. But unfortunately, those large connections are very, very costly. So we haven't developed them. I think it's coming. I think in the future, for the very reasons you talked about, of additional redundancy, reliability for the region. Between Everett, Seattle, and Tacoma, there is ample supply in this region for a long, long time. So connecting it will be important.
I think I saw a question down here. Jim, go ahead and reintroduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Jim Parvey with the City of Tacoma still.
Still has a job.
You never know. So my question kind of relates back to the silo topic that a couple of you brought up. And so I kind of work on the post-consumer side of the water industry, and I'm just wondering what the opportunities or what you see as the potential for collaboration between the wastewater industry and the drinking water industry to meet some of the impacted need, especially when you see such a small percentage of the water demand is really for drinking, and a lot of it is for other purposes. Thank you.
Is that to anybody in particular, or just okay, John?
And I did bring up the word silo. I think that from the business community and Economic Development Board, Chamber of Commerce, all of those types of organizations around town, I think is where we really need to start. We're starting a business roundtable that meets on a routine basis in the Tacoma Tide Flats because I think that there are a lot of interest in the Tacoma Tide Flats to develop additional manufacturing types of jobs and see if we can't use this water resource in a more in a better way.
I'll add a couple words there. And Jim, you certainly know this. The cost of, as we are currently structured, not just Tacoma, but generally, I think in the utilities, we are supposed to cover all of our own costs internally, meaning that the economics of water supply would be compared against the economics of reclaiming water. And I don't think at this stage the economics have borne out that, look at Brightwater. I don't think putting a lot of reused water back into the system right now, and probably won't for some time. Now, to Steve's point, is that the best systems thinking? Maybe not. Are we fully identifying and allocating the costs of discharging treated wastewater back to the various water bodies where it goes? Maybe not. But structurally, it's a very difficult problem to solve because of the way we operate.
Chris, a couple people have mentioned Brightwater. Just in case there are a few people who don't know what that refers to, Brightwater is?
Brightwater is a King County treatment facility that treats wastewater to to reuse standards. It's membrane treatment. It's a very high quality treatment.
Relatively new, correct?
Relatively new, relatively expensive.
Kim?
Just to add on one final thing, I think there are some opportunities to start looking at future changes that might start small but grow. I think back to when water conservation was becoming more and more important as we were in the drought and we were concerned. Things like requiring low flush toilets. It's one toilet at a time, but now, this many years later, it's had a large impact on where we are. So looking similarly at the green buildings, and you can put in gray water systems into a new building for a nominal increase in cost compared to trying to retrofit an existing building. So as you look at revitalizing areas like this, there are some opportunities to start building that into our future, one building at a time, and eventually then as costs balance out, we'll see more of that synergy moving forward.
Get it. Connie Bacon.
I do. My question, I think, is to John mostly. John, very glad to hear your words about collaboration and about drawing manufacturing. My question is, given what you've listened to today, and if you were a manufacturer outside of Tacoma, give us a couple of things that would be important to you to cite in Tacoma.
Well, I think it starts off with why do people want to move to Tacoma? Obviously, the natural beauty and just the location. And so I think that is something that we always have to be aware of as manufacturers, is that we can't take away from the natural beauty of this area and our desire, I think, in the Northwest to be more environmentally sensitive than maybe other parts of the country. But having said that, I guess it's always the impediments, for manufacturing to locate in any area, because it's usually a NIMBY type of attitude, perhaps with governments or perhaps with local citizens, et cetera, that they don't want manufacturing in their location. So I think that what we have to do from a collaborative standpoint is to continue to get our word out about the successes that we've had in the past and our desire to be a lot better in the future from a manufacturing standpoint, use these types of new technologies, talk about the economic impact. I think it's important for people to understand how an economy runs, and break down the walls, as I mentioned, between the government, citizens, academics, environmental groups in the area. We've got to get together and talk about this stuff. That's, I think, the most important part.
The back.
Yeah, my name is Brad Harp. I'm Water Resources Program Manager at the Health Department. I was wondering if Kim or Chris, you could just give a quick background on water use and land use planning as it's happened over the years.
Can you repeat that, Brad? Sorry.
Just repeat that one more time.
Water supply and land use planning, how they have or have not come together over the years.
How have water supply and land use planning come together or not over the last few years?
Okay. Well, water use and land use planning. I think one thing that immediately comes to mind, of course, here in Tacoma, and I alluded to this a little bit in the presentation, that we have a substantial groundwater resource located along South Tacoma Way for the most part, and those wells were developed initially in the early 1900s and continue to be developed and continue to be used and are a key part of our water supply portfolio. Land, unfortunately, well, there's two things. One, they're very, very productive wells, and they're very productive wells because the overlying geology allows recharge very quickly. There's a lot of water flowing through the aquifer there. The downside of that is that if you pour a gallon of oil on the surface of the ground, it will make it to the groundwater, and in fact, it has. So for much of the early 20th century industry in that region, and it was very industrialized, just poured the oil out back, and the legacy of that has been some contamination that the city responded to, I think, in a big way in the 1980s by creating a land use overlay called the South Tacoma Groundwater Protection District. And I don't know that that's unique in the country, but it's certainly unusual. And it overlays a regulatory set of inspections that Tacoma-Pierce County Health does on behalf of the city. And I think it's a place where it's been very successful because it's not a punitive program, regulatory punitive program for businesses. It's about education and informing best practices. And I think it's been very successful in that context and in reducing the risk of groundwater contamination. In our watershed, we have other land use purposes. It's primarily forestry and renewable resources that John talked about. 90% of the Green River watershed is available for active timber harvesting. 10% is owned, 11% is owned by the city, and some of that is actually available for active timber harvesting. But we, by working with those timber harvest, those companies, Plum Creek, Department of Natural Resources, et cetera, we have been able to protect the supply while responsibly producing wood for the region. So I think that's not as much a land use overlay of the government, although that certainly forest land is a zoning. I don't know if that gets to the question you had, but I think we've had some successful models here in Tacoma of working together.
Kim, you have anything to add to that?
I was just thinking of land use and water availability in the sense that it's sort of like if you build it, they will come sort of thing. People and companies tend to locate where water is available, so that ends up driving land use. There's also some potential to create a water market within a certain area, like the Tide Flats area, where there may be large water users who can't recycle all those, and it might be suitable for another use. So there's some opportunities to drive land use in that way too.
Okay, Claire Petridge, I wanted to note Claire is also an EDB board member. She's in addition to being a port commissioner, is a property owner and a business owner on the Foss Waterway, so is working this issue from a variety of angles. Claire.
Thanks, Bruce. I didn't have to say who I was. Thank you. Well, and this is the outside-the-box question from the back here, because we have on our panel right now, we have a consultant, we have a city representative, and we have a manufacturing representative. Earlier in the program, we had a great presentation on samples of things that have been done of, let's say, closed systems from Stockholm and Brazil and other places. So I'm sitting back here thinking, okay, we've got a major wastewater treatment plant in the heart of the Tide Flats. We've got a large manufacturing plant in the heart of the Tide Flats. Is there, okay, if you were to imagine the 5,000 acres located down there as a closed system, how would that happen, and what would the benefits be, and what kind of a model would that create? That's for everybody on the panel.
Closed system.
It's not stump the band must reply.
You want to go first? So can I ask you, I just want to make sure I understand the question. You're talking about there being a large manufacturing water user on the Tide Flats and a potential large reuse supply, as in the
City of Tacoma, the wastewater plant.
The city's
wastewater
wastewater plant.
Yeah.
And how could then those be coupled into a closed system?
Well, what we saw in the earlier presentations were models of things that had been done in various parts of the world to create systems where everything was working together.
Well, and so maybe the example is what Randy Hanna talked about. The goal at Joint Base Lewis McChord is net zero. So if we treated the Tide Flats, we had to be net zero on the Tide Flats. What would that look like, or how do we get there?
Yeah. Would anybody want to do it?
I'll start with the other two of you can have your thoughts there. In the 90s, I think, when we were working on some conservation projects and industrial conservation in the Tide Flats area in particular, and went through looking at conservation and sort of poked at that concept of, how can we create a water market in this area and wheel water around. It didn't get too far at the time, but I think the concepts and the ideas are still valid. There, as you point out, there's an ample supply of water, and users who maybe don't need the same kind of water quality that's coming through the drinking water supply and are going to be less sensitive to some of the issues that, say, a residential customer might have to reusing that water. So yeah, I think there are some ideas and possibilities that be created there. There's also, infrastructure that would need to go in to convey that water, which is what was cost prohibitive before. But I think we continue looking at these ideas and finding ways to make them viable in those kinds of areas.
John, you want to?
Try it one more time. I'd agree with what Kim said, that over the last 20 years, we have looked at various water reuse projects, tertiary treatment from the treatment plant as to where we can use it in our facility. There's obviously some concerns because some of the products we make have FDA type approval, so there's concerns about the quality of the water. And then it's basically, it's an infrastructure issue for both the city of Tacoma as well as us, because we have one pipeline now. And to segregate all of those different pipelines into different quality is a large cost issue. And so I think it's an issue, it's an economic issue, I think, is part of it. What's the payback for that when you have an ample supply of fresh water at this current time? Kind of similar to the problem that Chris has, where he's got a lot of infrastructure and no customers, no revenue.
So let's thank this panel one more time.